Hey, lit class. Liam here. William Butler Yeats. Who was he? Well, aside from being a
Sid. He was a 20th century Irish poet who, among many other works, wrote the poem Sailing to Byzantium, a narrative poem about an old man journeying to another country, first published in 1928. But what's so important about Sailing to Byzantium? Well, in my opinion, it's not just the romantic influences, or the modernist influences, but rather the esoteric philosophy of Yeats himself, which is present throughout the text. As such, I'm conducting a contextual analysis in light of Yeats's personal esoteric philosophies and how it is shown in the text Sailing to Byzantium.
But what do I mean when I say Yeats's esoteric philosophies? Well, to understand this statement, first we need to understand the context behind this contextual analysis. Yeats was born into the Protestant ascendancy, the upper class or aristocracy of the early 20th century Ireland, as England still had a chokehold over the Irish people at the time. However, Yeats's father had strong Irish nationalist values and wished for the liberty of Ireland from England's rule. Moreover, Yeats's father was also a religious skeptic, meaning that Yeats didn't grow up with much of an attachment to religion. Combine this with the fact that for a large portion of his childhood, Yeats received homeschooling and the majority of his education from his mother's stories of Irish folklore, it's very easy to see how Yeats eventually became an esoteric philosopher. Yeats would eventually be exposed to esoteric philosophy in art school in the form of A.P. Sinnett's Esoteric Buddhism. This exposed Yeats to Oriental mysticism, and as such, esoteric philosophy as a whole. Eventually, this would lead Yeats to the occult. Fast forward a few more years, and Yeats would join the occult organization known as the Theosophical Society, founded by Helena Blavatsky, a society from which Yeats is reportedly to have been expelled from. However, the only proof of this is the fact that his name is within the resignations book, and therefore he could have simply resigned. A few years later still, and Yeats would join the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, a secretive occult society which practiced ritual magic. Here Yeats would be a long-standing member for over 30 years, seeing all the power struggles that had ever taken place within the order. Within those 30 years, Yeats would become an active recruiter for the Isis-Uranus sect of the Hermetic Order. One of the more interesting recruitments made by Yeats is Maud Gonne, his longtime muse and unrequited love. A love which extended even to Gonne's daughter, Isolde, to whom he proposed despite a 30-year age difference. However, his proposal was ultimately rejected, and Yeats instead ended up marrying 25-year-old Georgiana Hyde-Lees. Over the course of their 20-year marriage, Yeats and his partner, whom he referred to unaffectionately as George, held over 400 sessions of automatic writing, producing nearly 4,000 pages of notes, which were all avidly studied by Yeats and worked into his poetry and books. This resulted in what Yeats refers to as the lunar system, in which he believes that humanity operates in gyres of concordia or unity and discordia or desire. As well as this informed his belief of the spiritus mundi, the world's spirit, in which he believes that all of human history and human future was held within a vast spirit world to which we were all connected. This spirit world, he believes, sprang forth from 7 wellsprings of human knowledge, ancient civilizations whose knowledge and culture still affected the world at the time. Now with our introductions made and our contextual frameworks established, I believe it is time to analyze this poem. But first, a word from our sponsors, Audible.com.
That is no country for old men. The young in one another's arms, birds in the trees, those dying generations at their song. The salmon falls, the mackerel-crowded seas, fish, flesh, or fowl commend all summer long whatever is begotten, born, and dies. Caught in that sensual music, all neglect monuments of unaging intellect. An aged man is but a paltry thing, a tattered coat upon a stick, unless soul clap its hands and sing, and louder sing, for every tatter in its mortal dress. Nor is there singing school, but studying monuments of its own magnificence, and therefore I have sailed the seas and come to the holy city of Byzantium. O sages, standing in God's holy fire, as in the gold mosaic of a wall, come from the holy fire, burn in a gyre, and be the singing masters of my soul. Consume my heart away, sick with desire, and fasten to a dying animal it knows not what it is, and gather me into the artifice of eternity. Once out of nature, I shall never take my bodily form from any natural thing, but such a form as Grecian goldsmiths make, of hammered gold, and gold enamelling to keep a drowsy emperor awake, or set upon a golden bough to sing to lords and ladies of Byzantium of what is past, or passing, or to come.
The first thing of note in Yeats's sailing to Byzantium is the strict octave structure to which he adheres, creating a repetitive, monotonous, and almost chant-like rhythm which is occasionally broken, furthering connections to Yeats's occult and esoteric philosophies through this cultist, ritualistic style that he creates through rhythm. This is combined with layers of alliterative prosody such as the soft sibilants of fish, flesh, or fowl, the fifth line of the first stanza, or the consonants of begotten, born, and dies in the following. These two examples, Yeats also uses the rule of threes. This creates a clear and repetitive rhythm, which combines with the rhythm of the pentameter used by the octave structure. As already established, part of the octave structure in which Yeats is writing is the iambic pentameter which he has to write in. However, Yeats also uses other meters, particularly in the last lines of stanzas. For example, the last line of the third stanza can be read as an amphibrach followed by a dactyl, followed by a trochee, and finally another dactyl. The disunity created by the alternate meter on these last lines places an emphasis on the themes which are within these last lines, which are largely relating back to time. For example, the first stanza ends by talking about monuments which are unaging, the second stanza ends by talking about the ancient city of Byzantium, the third stanza ends with eternity, and the fourth stanza ends with what is past, passing, or to come. This idea of time directly links into Yeats's philosophy of the lunar system, which is based on the passing of the phases of the moon. Moving away from structure, another important part of the poem is its rich and vivid imagery. An example of this is the juxtaposition between visual and auditory imagery shown in the second stanza. Here, auditory imagery is used to describe the spirit or soul, something intangible, which is happy and sings and claps, whereas visual imagery is used to describe the body, something physical, which is described as a tattered coat on a stick, and as a tattered mortal dress. This juxtaposition between the spiritual and physical, the auditory and the visual, sums up the esoteric beliefs of Yeats's lunar system, while also being representative of his fear of death in his old age. Imagery is also heavily used in the depiction of the ancient city of Byzantium, which is depicted as being covered in holy fire and being filled with golden statues. In a quote about sailing to Byzantium, Yeats himself stated that he symbolized the search for spiritual life as a journey to that city being Byzantium. As such, we can attribute this rich visual imagery of gold and holy fire to be a reference to his belief of the seven wellsprings of knowledge, as ancient Rome and thus Byzantium, which was once a capital of the Roman Empire, is one of them. Continuing, like many poems, Sailing to Byzantium uses metaphor, similes, and other forms of symbolism in order to lay a deeper meaning behind what is being said. For example, now that we know that the city of Byzantium is a symbol for the search for spiritual meaning, we know that the entire title becomes an extended metaphor, which symbolizes the spiritual journey Yeats has gone on after being raised in a skeptical household, having to turn to the occult and esoteric philosophy in order to find spiritual fulfillment. Similarly, the third line of the third stanza, "Come from the holy fire, Purna Jaya," uses the symbol of the Jaya, which is a key point of Yeats's lunar system, which perhaps indicates that Yeats views his own personal philosophy as being just as valid, if not more so, than any other religion. And aside from this, there are various metaphors and similes throughout the text, which, while they don't directly relate to his lunar system or other esoteric beliefs, still encompass his personal philosophy. For example, the last line of the first stanza, "Monuments of unaging intellect," encompasses his personal philosophy that literature will unite Ireland with the rest of the world, while the sixth line of the third stanza, "and fastened to a dying animal," expresses his fear of death in his old age. In all, I believe Yeats used sailing to Byzantium to express his esoteric beliefs in a time in which he was despairing at the state of the world. I believe this because of the strong themes within the text of escapism and of the fear of death, as well as the way in which Yeats describes the physical and the body. As in light of these themes, if it was read in terms of its modernist influence or its romantic influence, it would become a clouded and despairing mess, something which reflects the sad state of the human affair at the time, a seeming lament of sorts. However, if instead contextually read in terms of the ideas of Yeats's esoteric philosophies, it becomes a journey, a quest for his spiritual identity, and as he himself stated, a monument of unaging intellect.
Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face, tell me that you love me, even if it's fake.